Okay, recording has started. Welcome to the May 16th edition of the study hall. We've just finished covering the usual rules. If you don't know what those are, then please watch some previous videos where those have been recorded. We're going to continue on the theme of last time, which is more prompts containing blanks in critical reasoning. This, by all means, by all reports, this seems to be on the rise on the test, which is a good thing for some modes of thinking here. A lot of people seem to curse the gods when they see a critical reasoning question with a blank in it, but these things are more friendly in certain ways than our other questions. So we'll see that as we go along here. But we've gone through the rules just to make sure everybody's on the same page. When we talk about multiple choice questions, here's where you should pick the answers, please. If you are just watching this as a video, of course, this is not a thing. But if you are here live right now, then that's where you pick A through E, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Yes, I am talking. So I'll type that in the chat box. But in general, folks, if you have any sort of issues with like not hearing things or with not seeing anything on the board, like if there are not, 30 other people typing the same complaint in the chat box, then it's probably just your computer. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's where the multiple choice answers are at. And of course, we have to tell you, the problems are from GMAT Prep, so we do need to attach this copyright notice per GMAT. They are the author of the problems. GMAT Prep problems are okay for distribution because they are free. Remember that software itself is distributed free of charge, so fair use, we can distribute the problem. However, remember official guide problems, the same freedom does not extend to those. Official guide problems are not a thing that we can just distribute. So, any questions before we get started, please go ahead and type them in the box. Okay, otherwise, let's go to the first question. All about this. So again, remember where you're going to find multiple choice answers, ladies and gentlemen. That's where you're going to find them. So let me give you a timer. This problem has more words than a lot of problems do, so I'll give you a little bit of extra time for it. So there's a timer. Give it a shot. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on 3 minutes here. This is about the point where we should be it's cut and run time. There's 45 of you here right now, and I'm only counting about 33 answers. So remember how this test works. I know you're probably sick at the death of hearing me say this, but this is a test where you have to pick an answer. So if you I can't really force your hand here, but if you don't pick something, then you are not really preparing yourself for the test that you actually have to take. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so yeah, here are the results of this one so far. Again, there's still a few of you who are stragglers and haven't responded to the question, so please answer the problems. So here is what you guys picked. Kind of all over the place on this one. Again, we've got 8 non-responders. One of those is me, so we have 7. It's probably a couple of people having technical problems here, but again, if you are one of these 7 non-responders, please don't be a non-responder. This is not a thing. You're not allowed to be a non-responder on the GMAT. So, okay, we're kind of all over the place here. We have more people picking C than other answers, but not by too much of a margin. So I guess this is a good problem or whatever. Okay, let's talk about it. First, in a segue from last time, let's make some of the points. Let's reiterate some of the points that we made about these things in the blank last time. Let's open the floor to this sort of general question again. Same sort of question we saw last study hall, but when it comes to these strategy things, repetition is certainly never a bad thing. When you see a CR question with a blank in it, what do you do? It's a very general question. What should you do? What are your thoughts on that? Feel free to light up the chat box. With thoughts on the matter. Anticipate an answer. Okay, a couple of you are saying that. That's like a second step. I mean, what do you have to do before you can even start thinking about answers? And I mean, I think that, yeah, right, understand the question. Now, yeah, that seems like it's such a trivial thing, right? When people write understand the question, understand what they are asking for. Well, let's talk about a couple of these things. If you were privy to the discussion in the last study hall, then this is going to be old news. But let's make sure that we are on the same page here. So here are a couple of people's responses to this. Understand the question. Other people said assumptions and categorize the question. Okay, so understand the question is a very general statement. I mean, this is obviously true to whatever extent, but let's make sure we talk about what that actually means. Because when some people, like, you know, understand the question, you show that to 3 different people, you'll get 3 different understandings of what that means, maybe even 4. So, you know, understand the question could mean, to some people that means like try to classify it. To other people it just means look at it and try to, you know, get in your head some sense of what's going on. So let's try to make this more precise. What do you guys think about this? Like, just go find assumptions. Do you think that's a thing as a general strategy point? Not such a great idea, I concur. The question is, why not? Because, I mean, in some fraction of problems, it will be a good idea to think about assumptions. But yeah, right, it's what people are writing in the box right now. Most questions will not, in fact, ask you to find assumptions. Right? So don't just go blindly look for stuff like that. I mean, the problem here is that you only want to do that if you need to. You remember that the questions with the blanks in them are not like one type of question. Like, there's no category called questions with blanks. I mean, there's not really, I mean, I know that there are some things that are classified as, you know, complete the argument or whatever, but those are not really a separate category. Like, those are, some things with blanks, you're basically being asked to strengthen or weaken an argument. Some things with blanks, you're basically being asked to supply a conclusion. Some things with blanks, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the things with blanks, you pretty much can do any of the things that you would normally do with these problems. So, yeah, so the crowd here is pretty smart here. You don't know what the question is asking for. Now, what about categorize the question? Is that a good idea? Again, if you were here a couple of weeks ago, you kind of know what the answer is, but let's see what the crowd has to say. these things never hurt to discuss more than once because they are central points of strategy. It depends on the question. Maria says it depends on the question. That would be sort of an issue because then you would have to, that'd be sort of circular reasoning, right? You would have to, you wouldn't know until after you had gone to the effort if that were true. So, this would be more like applying a formula. So some people think you're supposed to apply a formula. So that's kind of the heart of the issue. But, yeah. Okay. Let me give you a simpler example of something. Let's say that you're having this. Let's say that you overhear the following conversation. Yeah, Vince pretty much has it. Let me give you a really stupidly simple example. Let's say that John says, hey, I hear that Jake is moving to San Diego. He's going to love it because it's warm and sunny all year long. Okay, and then Rachel says in response to John, actually, I don't think he's going to like it very much. Because blank. Okay, I mean, let's light up the chat box with what is some stuff that could go in that blank. Fire away. Yeah, he likes cold weather. Well, it doesn't rain. You can't. I mean, it's San Diego, people. You can't contradict facts. He hates the sun. He sunburns easily, right? Or something like. You could also introduce things like, you know, he wants to live close to family, and they live all the way over on the other side of the country. Yeah, he'll miss his family, that kind of thing, right? So, some possible fill-ins. I mean, the most common thing people are giving is he actually dislikes warmth and sunshine. I know some folks who are sort of like that. Also, something like his family lives out east, and he highly values living close to family, etc. And now the point is, did you have to classify this question to fill in the blank? I mean, almost certainly, of course not. Because, you know, people are kind of smart when it comes to following lines of conversation. I mean, imagine how excruciating absolutely any conversation in the world would be if you had to classify a statement in order to respond to them in a way that made sense. I mean, it would just, oh my God, you'd never be able to have a conversation with anybody about anything. It's kind of where we stand here, right, folks? So the point is, if you follow what's going on, which I don't see any reason why somebody wouldn't follow this argument, the point is this. If you follow what's going on, then first, classifying the question is certainly not going to help you. And it's probably going to work against you. Like, classifying will probably make it much harder to solve the problem. Because, I mean, you know, how would you classify this? I mean, we don't even really, I mean, I guess it's sort of a weakening question, but as soon as you get into that, this is suddenly a much more complex task. I mean, if you just understand the exact task that you're doing here, which is not very hard to understand, you're just looking for a reason why Jake might not like San Diego, you're good, right? So that's the point. The exact task here is what the point is, and if you intuitively grasp what the exact task is, then there is absolutely no point in classifying problems. So that's the takeaway. if you already understand the exact task you are called to do, don't classify. The only way is down if you start classifying stuff when you understand the exact task. The classifying stuff is all a backup. I mean, that's all there as like salvage options if you are confused or lost or you don't follow or blah, 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 or whatever. So, but the first thing you want to try to do is just understand what's going on here. So when people say categorize the question, yeah, nuh-uh, unless you're confused. Only if you don't actually understand what you are tasked with. You're supposed to be looking for. If you already understand the exact task, then hey, folks, yeah. So when this poster, I think it's Obiora, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. When this poster says understand the question, the kind of understand we're talking about is just like the conversational kind of understanding. Like as long as you, if any of you are capable of staying in a conversation, then you are totally also capable of this. So you want to understand the question in the quote conversational unquote sense of understanding. In other words, just understand what sort of thing would follow and what sort of thing wouldn't. So let's do that here. In this passage, let's take it to a clean page. All right, what's going on here is some other things. I mean, these are not things that you have to like memorize or be taught, but let's make sure that we note them just so that you can use them as hints in the future. When you see these words, was widely predicted to. People thought this. It was largely believed that X. Most people thought that Y. Where are they definitely going to go with anything like that? Was widely thought. People predicted that. Lots of people said that X would, etc. Where are they going to go with this? So Eric has said something. Some people are still typing. Eric's basically on the ball here. Yeah, right? It means, and I mean, do you have to know this as a rule? You know, not really, folks. I mean, if you have conversations with people, then you're going to know this is what's happening. Because, I mean, people don't go with, hey, lots of people ever thought this, unless they're going to start contradicting it. Like, if I open a conversation about nutrition with, hey, lots of people think fruit is really good for you, then you know where I'm going with that. I'm going to start telling you, by the way, fruit, here are the downsides. So you should anticipate whenever you see anything like that, there's going to be, I mean, the author is, something here is going to, whether it's the author, it's him or herself, or the evidence or whatnot, something is going to shoot down this view. That's a takeaway. I mean, this is not a new thing that you are learning that you did not already know. I mean, everybody kind of from the age of about 9 or so knows this. But again, when you're looking at, if you look at these as academic problems, it is surprisingly easy to forget things that you have known forever and ever. Amen. So, okay. Lots of people thought that computers would make people watch less TV, basically. But they did a bunch of studies, and they found that people with computers actually do, so not but. They thought this, they found some studies that show that, yes, people with computers watch less television. But it says that still doesn't really show what these people were thinking. It's not. So basically these people think that this is evidence in their favor, but it isn't. So someone give me, what are we looking for here? I mean, if you wanted to classify this, there are a bunch of ways. I mean, it's kind of a hybrid of different categories, but you don't have to classify it. You just have to understand what the point is. And to do that, just follow it the way you would follow a normal conclusion. So yeah, Eric, don't give me premise and conclusion. That's the whole point. Do not give me that unless you have to. It's kind of like here with Jake in San Diego. Hopefully you do not have to think about premises and conclusions to stay in this conversation. If you do, then conversation is probably going to be very hard for you. The point is, what you want to give me here is just, hey, we need a reason why Jake will not like San Diego. And only if somehow you are not following that would you start getting into premise and conclusion and assumption and blah, 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 blah. But if you follow this, people, you do not need to think about those things. So, reason with people with computers don't watch TV besides computers. Yeah, this is the idea of what Vince is saying here. Computer usage. I mean, Jason, you have made a statement, but you're not really telling me what you're looking for. Same thing with Faisal. Moku has suggested a possible answer. So that, and then Rakesh says weakens the study. I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but let's talk about it. So here are two of the responses that you guys gave. There's one of them. There's the other one. So the question is, what the heck are we even looking for in the first place? So let's try to find out, right? So the question is, what are we even looking for? Again, the single most important thing you can do is not think of these as academic problems. Just think of them as conversation. I mean, people, if it's hard to imagine actually having a conversation about a topic like this, then just imagine you read it in the magazine, or it just showed up on the news or something like that. You just saw it in some media, and that's what prompted your discussion of it. Because that's usually what prompts people's discussion of random things. They see stories in the media. So, just pretend you saw this on a news report or a magazine or whatever media that you normally look at. So the point here is, again, I mean, you have all this evidence that, yes, people with computers do watch less TV, and yet the person you're talking to is still saying, hey, you know what? This doesn't mean it's the computers that did that. So what the issue is at hand here, I mean, it's a fact that it is a factual, hard fact that people with computers watch less TV than people without computers. But what the issue here is the presence of computers responsible for the difference? And so, I mean, if the answer is yes, then you don't really have much to do besides just point to this evidence. But this speaker here, the person you're talking to, says actually it's not. So if it's not responsible, then the question is, what else is responsible? So this is what you're trying to find. I mean, if you follow this much of the conversation, again, where the operative word here, folks, is conversation. If you follow this much of it, then you're all good, because that's the thing you're looking for. What you're looking for is, can I think of another thing that would actually account for the difference? So this is what we want. All right, so we need another thing. This is what we want. We need another reason for the difference in computer usage, or difference in TV viewing. In other words, a reason that does not have to do with computers, usurping that time. All right, well, let's take a look at the answer choices. So, many people who watch little or no television, because we're trying to explain a trend, by the way. The other thing that should be very obvious if you are thinking in a conversational sort of way is that anything that contradicts the trend will not explain the trend. So, because remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reconcile this evidence. We're trying to figure out why this is a true fact. So, A is just, oh, by the way, I mean, the first thing you should be suspicious of with A is that it's just talking about, oh, there are lots of people who are exceptions. I mean, folks, trends, that's why trends are trends and not universal laws, because they do have exceptions. That's kind of the point. Like anything that is a trend is almost by definition going to have exceptions. So pointing out that there are many people who blah, 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 blah is not really a thing. I mean, so what? But more to the point here, this would go against the factual evidence. So since we're trying to explain that evidence, we certainly don't, we're not going to get any help from statements like this, statements that actually go against the trend in the first place. B, even though most computer owners watch significantly less television, some of them watch more. I mean, again, B is the exact same problem as A. I mean, the first issue is that we're just talking about, oh, there are some exceptions, which, so what, people? I mean, there's always going to be some exceptions. And also, again, this goes against the factual trend. So some takeaways that we can get here. The first thing is like the presence of some outliers or exceptions has no effect on a trend. In fact, whenever you have any sort of trend, you should expect the presence of some like exceptions or whatever. Also, this is just probably rather obvious in these terms, but if you are seeking to explain something, then things that contradict it don't help. So keep that in mind. C says that the people who do have computers already belong to groups that watched less TV in the first place. Now we have a thing, right? In other words, the difference wasn't caused by the computers. It's a pre-existing difference. So that's totally a thing. I mean, this is the answer that we want. I mean, C says that the difference in that evidence is a thing, but that it's not because they have computers. It's that they were the people, these are largely the people who already watched less TV in the first place. So no matter what activity or what item they buy or activity they take up, the reason why they watch less TV than average. Because it's not, notice what's not happening here. What's not happening is people watch less TV than they used to before they bought computers. Because then this would not explain anything. But we're just looking at static rates of TV viewing. We're looking at how much TV do these people watch now versus other people watch now. It's not a now versus before computers. If it were, it would be a different issue entirely. Someone says keywords are demographic groups. Not really. I mean, demographic groups is probably the least important word in that phrase. I mean, the things that are important here are computer owners. Already, they have been long been known to mean they have done this already for a good long time. spend less time watching TV. But those are the things that are actually key words here. I mean, demographic groups basically doesn't matter at all. Like if you replace demographic groups with social clubs, then you will get exactly the same effect on the argument. I mean, we don't care what the groups are they belong to. We care that these are people who already watch less television. So hopefully that helps. D says many computers, so this is the answer we want, but let's look at the other two anyway. D says many computer owners have enough leisure time that spending significant amounts of time still leaves ample time for watching television. Well, I mean, so D says that they could watch just as much TV, but that's not what we are after. I mean, we're trying to explain why they don't. I mean, D still doesn't tell us that, right? D gives us, oh, well, they could if they wanted to, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't help explain why they don't. And then E basically says that it's basically the same as D. I mean, it basically says they have time to watch the TV, but so what? It doesn't explain why they don't. So D and E, well, they have the time. So what? Remember, stay focused. This doesn't explain why they don't watch TV. Because, I mean, if you went the other way on this, that would also be a thing. Like if you said, if you had, you know, people who own computers generally are so busy at work that they have less time to watch TV in the first place, then that would be another correct answer here, because then the difference would be explained by how busy the people are at work and not strictly by the fact that they have computers. So, I mean, there are multiple possible answers here that are correct. They just happen to give you what is in C. Any questions about this? Again, notice the focus. The most important thing here is to treat this like a normal conversation of human beings and to have a focus as a result. Because one thing is, in conversations, people are totally focused. I mean, people are very weirdly, exactly focused in normal human conversation. Like when you're talking about Jake in San Diego, everybody will instantly realize that if you are not giving a reason why Jake will hate San Diego, then you are off topic. So you just want to take that same instinct into these sorts of questions. So focus, folks, it's a thing. Any questions about this problem, feel free to type them in the chat box. Otherwise, let's move on to another item. Rajiv, if you're still typing, go ahead and let's see. If not, you have something in your text box you might want to erase it. Is this about what will fit for this segment? Let's make a blank page here to address these questions. Rajiv, the short answer is no, because you still have something that does not at all in any way explain what you are trying to explain. It has nothing to do with the many people thing. I mean, E just says that if these guys wanted to watch TV, they would have the time. And that's not the point. You're trying to explain why this specific group of people watches less TV, which, even if it's everybody, that doesn't mean anything. And by the way, I mean, okay, on the forums, one thing people have like wasted a lot of brain power trying to do is to like stick exact percentages on the words many and most. I mean, people, this is conversational reasoning. If you think that you have to stick exact mathematical quantities on things, then you are not thinking in the right way. Yeah, I mean, just think of those as, you know, masses of people or whatever. If we have many or most, that means most means, you know, more than half, but not everybody. Many is a bunch of people. There are a significant number of blah, blah, blah. You don't really need less than that. So K says this. I guess I don't 100% understand this question, but it's an interestingly phrased question. Is it about? I mean, it is of course about what will fit. I mean, clearly you have to think about what will fit. But remember that the reasoning that you have to employ is real world reasoning. You know, you often have to, you can, and often must use basically your normal common sense to make these connections. And so on and so forth. I mean, if you think like a machine here, you're going to be in big trouble. So that's the best answer I have to that. Oh yeah, it doesn't matter what you think is true. I mean, people, man, we're just trying to figure out which of these things. I mean, they're not going to, okay, I mean, if you're asking, will they give you like a totally unreasonable statement, the answer is no. I mean, all of the reasons for things will be plausible. I mean, this is certainly not an unreasonable statement. You know, I mean, this is probably true. I mean, not anymore because everybody has a computer now, but back when only some people had computers, I mean, upper class people really don't watch as much TV as people in lower classes do. So this is probably a true statement. But we don't really care whether it is true or not. That's not the point. The point is, hey, hypothetically say this is true. What will that explain if this were the case? So, yeah. I mean, opinion, it doesn't matter. Vince is on point with that. Finally, Rajiv says the extra time will be used to watch TV. We don't know that. We don't know what they do with the extra time. Right? Apparently, they don't use it to watch TV. But we don't care. It doesn't explain why they don't. So if you stay focused, you don't have to really deal too much with that. Let's look at another question. I just killed your multiple choice answers. How about that one? Again, you know where to get the multiple choice answers. That's where you get the multiple choice answers from. Underneath your name. So that's where you want to look. Here's a timer for this problem. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this one seems to be much less of an issue for a lot of you guys, so we'll probably get through it more quickly. I know that if you guys have seen a lot of these sessions, then you're going to know what we have to say in response to. Yeah, it's what Eric said, but let's just make sure that we, you know, let's spend the 30 seconds or whatever to talk about that. I mean, what's ironic about this question is the fact that you even have to ask this question is exactly the reason why this is a useless thing to ask. It's always thinking about difficulty levels is at best useless, and at worst an active distraction from what actually matters. Because, I mean, you know, okay, like my favorite analogy for this is the following. Like, imagine that someone is, instead of answering CR questions, let's say that someone is shooting a gun at you for 5 minutes, and you have to just dodge the bullets and not die. Let's say that's what you have to do. I mean, think about whether you're going to be thinking about difficulty there. I mean, are you going to be like, oh my gosh, I would rate that last bullet as an 8 out of 10 on a difficulty scale of dodging it? I mean, no, of course you're not, because you're going to be too busy trying to stay alive and dodge the bullets that are being shot at you. Now, the thing is, this is the same thing. The point is, if you were thinking about rating those last bullets on a scale of 10, you realize that would be a distraction. You would be much less on the ball with dodging the next bullet that is shot at you. Same thing is true here, people. I mean, if you think about trying to rank these things on a difficulty scale, all that's going to do is give you less brain power to work on the problems with. And, you know, just think about the fact that you even have to ask this. I mean, if you have to ask this, what does that mean? It means that you can't figure it out by yourself. So that's why this is at best useless, because this is not anything that will ever be something that you will ever have any idea about. So really don't think about it, people. Don't ever think about difficulty levels, ever, ever, ever. Unless you write tests, then fine, think about them. But yeah, all right, let's talk about the problem here. So here are the responses. So we do have an overwhelming majority in this case of people on choice E. So we probably don't have to spend a million years on this one, but let's go ahead and talk about it anyway. So the deal is, I mean, just make sure you understand the task. Again, you don't necessarily have to classify or whatever, but let's make sure we know what's on the table. So what they say is they found these drugs basically in the water. If they were there in large quantities, then they would affect people, but they are not. Like, the amount of drug in the water is way too low to have any actual response in people. But it will still eliminating them according to these people, according to the government or whatever, will still have positive effects. So basically, we know there's not enough drug. We know there's not enough druggy stuff in the water to hurt people. But authorities say removing the druggy stuff will still have benefit. So what are we looking for? We're looking for a benefit that is not what? Like, what kind of thing are we looking for here? Chat box or whatever. Yeah, we need an indirect benefit, precisely, Rajiv says. It's indirect, meaning it's not a direct impact on human health because the facts preclude that. So what we want here is, you know, how could, you know, filtering out the drugs, how could this plan help humans indirectly? Because we know it won't directly help them. Like, we know that there is no direct physiological effect because they told us that. Don't contradict the facts, people. So how could this plan help humans? So A is not a way that the plan could help humans. I mean, A just says that if you had more of some of these, then they would still be harmless, but they're not this is the opposite, right? Because if they were still harmless, then taking them away would not help people. So this is the opposite of what we want. Some of the substances can counteract the effects of others. Well, there's two things that are not okay with B. I mean, the first is that we know possible harmful effects, but we know there's not enough of these things to cause those. So we're talking about costs and benefits that don't apply because there are not enough of these things to cause any of those things. But also B says you have some pluses and some minuses. So taking these away will take away the pluses and the minuses. So not evidence for what we want. C, people who develop undesirable side effects when being treated generally have their treatment changed. This has nothing at all to do with why we would want to remove those things from the water. I mean, this is not an issue of benefits or costs of having those things in there. D is sort of like A. This is also the opposite of what we want. Because we want, I mean, if they rapidly break down into things that are harmless, then that's evidence that removing them will do nothing. Even if one of those people goes swimming in the lake, it's still not relevant because I'm assuming you mean C and not D. Even people who go swimming in these things, we know, again, they tell us, folks, they tell us, hey, fact, there is not enough stuff in the water to cause issues. So that even if so, we know that even if you go swimming all day long in the water, it's not going to do anything because they said there's not enough stuff. E says, on the other hand, it does say low concentrations. So even though the concentrations are too low to affect humans, if you have bacteria that cause disease, they can become resistant. So that's the point of choice E, right? Like, even if there's no direct benefit, the point is that removing the drug substances has an indirect benefit by, you know, not letting these bacteria develop resistance. So that's what we want, right? Because, I mean, the humans aren't feeling the effects because there's not enough stuff in there. But according to this choice, the bacteria are still feeling it. So if you take it away, then it won't let the bacteria develop resistance anymore. This is a public health benefit. Notice a certain amount of real world sense is needed to connect these ideas. Like, you do have to, like, realizing that this is a public health benefit is sort of a common sense thing. It's not really what is the logical reasoning thing. It's just, oh, hey, man, if you don't let bacteria become resistant, that's a good thing. Right? It's not a rules thing. That's just a let's use common sense kind of story. Any questions about this one? Put them in the box, please. Now we'll move on to another item. Contend. Contend basically just means that they say that, they claim. It's a verb that means kind of the same thing as claim. Hope that helps. All right. Next question. How about this? Here's a timer. Have fun. We still have a bunch of non-responders. Let's kill this and get an answer in the next 10, 15 seconds or whatnot. Yeah, if you haven't picked something, please pick something that is a thing. One person is saying if we are wavering between two answers, what are the tips for how to choose? I mean, they are exactly the same tips that, I guess I don't understand the question. The things that help you choose between two answers are the same things that help you answer the problems in the first place. I mean, you're not suddenly dealing with a new question when there are two choices left. It's still the same question. And the keys to it are still the same. I mean, if you're asking how to make a random guess, then any plan is as good as any other plan because it's a random guess, people. Like, if my plan for random guessing is to just pick the first choice that's left, and if your plan is to spell out words like ace and cab and babe, then your plan is no better and no worse than mine. So, okay. Vince asks, should we read the last sentence of the argument? Maybe. I mean, experiment with that. Play around with it and see if that helps you. Because the difference when there's a blank is that you might not really understand the context of the last sentence. You know, if it's a question prompt, then definitely read the question first. Because if it says, like, hey, which one is an assumption, then you should, you know that you're looking for assumptions or whatever. But my best answer to that is just play around with this and see if this works for you. Play around with doing this and see whether it works. Because, you know, in these passages, in many of these questions, you won't understand the context of the blank until you've read the passage. But in others, maybe you will. You just have to, you know, if it pays dividends when you try it, then do it. If it doesn't, then don't. Because, like, here, this statistic would be what we would expect even if, I mean, we don't know what the heck is going on. Let's read that first. We don't understand. What is the statistic? I mean, at least you could get something out of that. You could be like, I know that I'm trying to give some other reason for some statistic. So if you are good at abstracting that kind of thing, it's going to be a lot like this problem, actually. So, meaning, you could actually rephrase this problem in the same way, this one that you saw before. Blah, 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 here's the statistic, people who own computers watch less TV. Then you can say, hey man, this statistic is what we would expect to see anyway, because blah, blah, blah. So if you know, I mean, yeah, there's still some value to be had in doing that if it gives you a sense of the task. But really, at the end of the day, the best answer is just mess around with it, and if it works for you, keep it. If it doesn't, don't. So what's going on here is when the statistic we're trying to explain is that volunteers live longer than non-volunteers. That's the statistic. But then it says it's what we would expect anyway. So this was a conversation, you know what we need here, right? I mean, it's why we would expect this thing. Hey man, we would, your interlocutor, whoever you're talking to, says, again, give them a name, it'll help you turn this into a dialogue, and it'll help you avoid the dreaded academic mentality. Let's say we're talking to someone whose name is Chad. I don't know. Chad says, hey man, we would expect to see volunteers live longer anyway. So what is Chad looking for? He's saying the reason is not the endorphins thing. So reason why we're not surprised, that's still a little bit abstract. I mean, if we can get more specific than that, it's better. And we want a reason why what? Like, we're looking for a reason for what thing specifically that is not what. Why do they live longer? Yeah, that's what we want. We want a reason for that. And specifically, we need a reason for that that is not what. It's gotta have something to do with volunteering, but it has to not be the endorphins thing. It has to not be longevity, endorphins, blah, 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 blah. So, we need a reason why volunteers would live longer on average. And we know that this reason should be something unrelated to the endorphins thing. That's what we want. We want some non-endorphin reason why these people are going to live longer. So, okay, well, A says, in the communities studied, women were much more likely to do volunteer work, and women live longer. Hey, that's exactly what we want. Because then, this is a totally different explanation, right? According to this explanation, they live longer because they are female, not because they are volunteers, not because it's anything to do with volunteerism at all. Totally different reason why they live longer. There you go. The other ones, I mean, B does not tell you why people would live longer. That's not a thing. C, the feelings of well-being induced by endorphins. This is actually more evidence in favor of endorphins. This is not a thing that will help you find an alternative reason. You know, like C is kind of like, here's a mechanism by which the endorphins could work, but that's not what we want. We want a mechanism that is totally not the endorphin. D is rare for a person to keep up with. I mean, great, so what? But we're talking about people who do, not whether people can do it or not on average. The people who do volunteer, here's what happens. And then some people find that keeping a commitment becomes a source of stress. Again, this would, if anything, what would you expect this to do? I mean, how does stress generally contribute to like lifespans, if at all? Right, it's going to shorten your life. I mean, stress is not a good thing. Like, I mean, this is kind of the opposite. If anything, this would point to the opposite of what's observed. You remember, folks, if you find something that goes the wrong way, it's not what you want. I mean, we want a reason why volunteers do live longer. If you have like, oh, they're stressed out, I mean, that's definitely not that. That is precisely the opposite of what we want. So, yeah, pretty strong majority for A here. I don't think anybody's typing, so let's look at another item. Here is another one. Okay. Again, you know where to get the multiple choice answers. You guys are pros at this by now. That's where you get the multiple choice answers. Have at it. I realized I forgot to give you a timer, so here is the half of a timer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there are still about 10 of you who are non-responders. So let's pick something that is a thing, please, and then we will start looking at it. Okay, remember what the point is to figure out, in a pretty much conversational sense, what is the point? What do we want here? So what's going on? And again, what you want to always do here is translate into conversational language, at least in your head, because that's what will help you understand it. So, hey man, these people on this island, they started getting this powdered milk. Poor people on this island started getting donations of powdered milk for free. So they drank it. I mean, it doesn't say explicitly that they drank it, but this is where kind of the common sense comes in. Like, they got donations of free food and they are very poor, so they're gonna eat it. They're gonna drink it. You can do that. But then, whoa, they got liver cancer. So, and then the person that you're talking to says we can probably pin the blame on the milk. The milk is probably responsible because it says rats exposed to aflatoxin get cancer when they drink milk. So what are we missing here? I mean, what concept just comes totally out of nowhere here? Yeah, like aflatoxin, right? I mean, what the heck is this aflatoxin thing? I mean, we're trying to figure out why this is. This is totally not a relevant thing at all unless we can connect aflatoxin to this argument. Because right now the argument has nothing whatsoever to do with aflatoxin. Nothing at all. Like, the argument is just, oh, we donated some milk and people drank it and they got cancer. Yeah. No mention of aflatoxin here in any sort of way. So the question is, right now, this has precisely nothing at all to do with anything in the argument. So what we need is a connection. We need something that aflatoxin, we need some evidence that aflatoxin is actually involved in this pathway or whatever here. So how were they exposed to it? Well, A is that, right? Because A is they get it from peanuts. So now we know why this evidence is relevant, because we know that it's a staple, so they eat them all the time. And so that means they're exposed to aflatoxin. Yeah. B says that the liver is sensitive to aflatoxin, but that doesn't tell you anything, because this is not a reason. We need evidence that these guys on this island are actually being exposed to aflatoxin, and B is not that, right? B is not evidence that they are. Like, B is like, oh, theoretically speaking, if these people came into contact with aflatoxin, then it would be bad for them. It's not the point, though. We need evidence that they do. We need a hard stop of, oh, hey, man, these people actually do see aflatoxin. C, we don't really care about other proteins, because if casein is the one that has the effect, then it is. And it has nothing to do with aflatoxin. D, powdered milk is the most appropriate form to send. That has nothing to do with aflatoxin. E, the people had been screened for their ability to digest it. That has nothing to do with aflatoxin. So we want A. Wouldn't it mean no? This question here, if you have A, doesn't that mean they were exposed to cancer earlier? No, because if you look at the evidence, it's not rats exposed to aflatoxin randomly develop cancer. It's rats exposed to aflatoxin develop cancer when they drink milk. Whoa, it's the combination of aflatoxin plus milk. So earlier they didn't have the milk, so there was nothing to catalyze the process. Like milk is the catalyst. For whatever reason, we don't know why or how or whatever, but we know that it is. There you go. You guys did pretty well at that. I don't see anybody else typing questions, so we can probably, if we're champions with the speed here, we can do one more. So let's see if we can do that. How about this? Last one. We probably won't have quite as much time for post-problem discussion here, but at least we can get it on the board. You can try it, and we can debrief it at the end. So it's shorter problem, so less time. Here's a timer. Go for it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we still have a lot of non-responses. It's like only about 30 answers out of 42 people. So please pick something that is a thing. You know where the answer choices are. Take about 10 more seconds to do that if you have to. Okay, let's talk about it. This is your profile of responses. Still pretty good, just not as, not quite as strong a majority as the last couple problems, but decent. So let's take a look. So yeah, the government, again, conversational language is the key here. Let's put this in informal language. So the government decided to up the pensions. Like the government increased pensions for everybody over 65. And I mean, this next sentence, this thing that's like right here, inflation has been negligible and people have gotten the money. I mean, that's not a super integral part of your reasoning here. What they're doing is just telling you that there are not, like, they're ruling out the idea that maybe the people just didn't get the money, or that it was stolen from them, or that, you know, if there was a lot of inflation, then the 20% might have been swallowed by inflation. So they're just telling you that didn't happen either. So basically, this is just telling you, yes, they really got the money, and yes, it was really an increase. So yes, they received the money. And yes, it was a real increase because there was not like rampant inflation. However, many of them are still no better off financially. But lots of them are in the same financial situation. So, I mean, here we have, this is basically a straight out contradiction. I mean, we have, seemingly so, this seems to be a contradiction. I mean, the government did raise the pensions, fact, they did it, it was a thing. But even though they did, and people did get more money from the government, they somehow did not have more money overall. So what are we, you can have a very specific sense of what we want here, right? I mean, what is the only thing that could cause them, like in general, if they don't have more money despite getting more money from the government, then what does that mean? What does that mean something had to do or someone had to do? Chat box, light it up. Yeah, they must have lost some other source of money, right? This is only possible. I mean, you can just basically common sense here, but this is only possible if they received correspondingly less money from some other source. So that's what we want here. Because, I mean, otherwise, folks, a 20% increase in payments would result in more money. So if it doesn't, then the only possible way that could be true is if they had some other source of the cash and it just wasn't happening as much. So some other source of money where they weren't getting as much. I mean, if A were true, then A would be, if A were true, then A would be exactly the opposite of what we want. Like if A were a thing. This is interesting. It is not letting me use the whiteboard tools. I don't understand. It's actually not letting me draw or write on the board. Okay. All right. That was weird. All right. So they, if they rely entirely on the government pension, then this would actually be impossible. So no, it's not a time thing. I mean, Vince, these things are open pretty much whenever. Not only is A, I mean, A is actually impossible. If A were true, then the effect they described could not happen. Because if A were true, then they would definitely be better off by exactly 20%. B, we don't care, I mean, because they did get the money. So B just says they got it 3 weeks later than normal, but they still got it. So we don't care. C, they buy goods whose prices tend to rise fast. It doesn't matter what they buy. I mean, what matters is they have more money. It doesn't. What they do with the money is not a thing. D, the pension was increased when the number of root was below reached an all-time high. Well, that might be the motivation why they did it, but it's not. I mean, this doesn't explain what the offsetting effect is. Because, I mean, some people see this choice and they think, oh, if they were below the poverty line, then they might still be below the poverty line if there was a 20% increase. That is true, but that doesn't matter because, you know, if you are below the poverty line and you get a 20% increase and you are still below the poverty line, you're still better off. I mean, you are still poor, but you are not as poor as you were before. So that's still an improvement. It's still relatively speaking. So D doesn't explain anything because, I mean, D says here's why, kind of why they did it, but not effects or whatever. Finally, E says people, the kids pitch in the rest of the money, but only by enough to, like, you know, give them a certain living. So basically, what E says is that the kids contribute enough to make a certain total sum. which is the amount. Which is the amount required for whatever a comfortable living is defined as. And you notice you don't have to define that, you just have to know that it's a thing. So, I mean, that's the point, though. They're contributing toward a total sum, which means that if the government gives more of that total sum, they will simply give less of it. It's like financial aid for college, right? I mean, if you get more financial aid, you just pay less tuition. You don't pay the same amount of tuition and then give the school more money. Like, the school will get the same amount of money regardless of how much the federal financial aid gives them, because you have to pay the rest. So the same sort of thing. So this is what we want. He says that in some that they're getting less money from their kids. Question, Jason says, if the prices rise, doesn't that diminish the purchasing power? Yes, it does, but that doesn't affect this relative judgment. I mean, if I give you 20% more money in a time of high inflation, you are still better off. I mean, does it inflation and that the goods are costing more and more? Yes, it does suck, but you still have 20% more money in your pocket. That doesn't affect that. Like, 20% more is still better off than not 20% more, regardless of inflation. So that doesn't address the point. Right. I mean, even if prices are fast, okay, I guess instead of inflation, I meant prices rising. Even if prices are rising, who cares, man? If your money goes up by 20%, you are still better off than if it does not, because you have more money. I mean, yes, it sucks that prices are going up, but it would suck even more if you didn't get that 20%. Okay, let's kill it here pretty soon. I see a couple of you guys typing, so please, we're sort of over time at this point, so please go ahead and finish typing what you are typing, and we're going to, you're welcome. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here in just a sec. So these are GMAT prep questions. Yes, they are. From the free software, which is why we are allowed to use them. There might be one or two that are cross-referenced in the official guide, because there is, I don't know if that's where you're going with this, but there are a handful of questions that are in both the GMAT prep and the official guide. But we do verify that any question that we have seen on here is actually in the software, because we don't want to get in hot water with copyright. So, yeah. All right. Anything else? Again, Moku, I don't know exactly where you're going with that. Yeah, there is some overlap. I mean, also, one thing you will discover if you look at enough of these problems is that there are certain topics where there are lots of different questions about the same topic. Like in sentence correction, there are 3 different problems about Mary Leakey and research on, like, monkeys. There's also 2 different critical reasoning questions about deer ticks, and there's probably a bunch of versions of these things, so that shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, there's also questions where they give you the same passage but boldface different lines of it. So who knows, man. All right, thanks, and we got to wrap up here. Good night and good luck. I'm going to go ahead and kill the recording at this point, and we're going to log you out summarily in about 30 seconds, but good night and good luck. By the way, the next session is in 3 weeks, not 2 weeks. The next session is on June 6th, or June 5th or 7th or 6th, or whatever the Thursday is. That's around single-digit June. So, all right. Thanks again, and I will talk to you guys in 3 weeks. Good night and good luck.